Alright, alright. Oh, wait. Well, let me transition over. One last thing. At least I remember this time. Uh, Captions. Those captions. I mean, I still have my OBS plugin, but it doesn't seem or at least from like on my end, when I go to my streams, like either my VODs or something like that, and I see it, I don't see the CC kind of like a thing down below, and so I just gonna have to look. I'm using a different system right now, and I just turn it on, so now it'll show up. And now this one I can like I send captions directly to like OBS or WebSocket, so I can do that. But I kind of like the stream CC thing be on Twitch. But I don't think it's be on the mobile, unfortunately, which does suck. I really gotta figure out like what's wrong with my OBS plugin and why is it not working. I really gotta like troubleshoot that and doing this stuff. Hi Naz, how you doing? And thank you for retweeting the stream, and thank you so much. So the myths about like anarchism. This is something I can just like go on about, like talk about like whatsoever. But I figure like this is one of those things like, ooh, here's someone that has written something about that. And actually, the thing we'll go into is, yeah, this was actually from a panel at the like a book fair. But I still figured out like, you know what, it's worth for me to read and then like add my own things to it, as it were. And if I like this like article enough, I might be able to just like clip this and keep it as a highlight and keep it on my channel, as it were, since, well, I'm a narco-syndicalist, and maybe there'll be like some things about like the myths of like anarchism, and so I can keep it on them. There's also a bunch of like other things I can like read that are just like basically 101 sort of thing, 101 like glossary sort of things, 101 on the state, 101 on like capitalism, 101 on like anarchists and stuff like that, the basic stuff, as it were. And I can like make playlists and stream those, make highlights of those, and have it on my channel as a playlist, as it were. So that way I can easily like for on Twitch point to like there, as it were, but also do the same thing on YouTube, as it were. And actually, well, since I am re-uploading things to my YouTube channel, I can also like since I can get those like videos, I can also put them back onto like Twitch. Oh, that's not something I should do. So that way people can just like even on Twitch can like go to like the thing, in case some people are on Twitch but not on YouTube. I just never know. And thank you, NaztheNeko, for like retweeting the stream. And if you want to be like one of the cool kids like NaztheNeko and retweet my stream, there it is. I updated the retweet command. If you want to read along with me, I have updated the reading command as well. Oh, and this is exactly the page that I read from the Anarchist Library, the myths about anarchism, from Iain McKay. I think Iain McKay is actually one of those people that collaborated, that worked on the like anarchism FAQ, which is something that I have read. It's big, it's long. I might read that on stream at some point. At some point, I don't know when. I should get back to like reading the series of essays on the abolitions for the people, and finish up David Graybird's Direct Action and Iconography, because I really am fascinated by that book, because I like David Graybird's writings. But anyway, so Iain McKay, myths about anarchism and topics of myths, and not topic anarchism. Okay. Date in January 9th, 2016, so relatively recently, and retrieved there from there. Okay. Narco, myths about anarchism. General myths, myths about individual anarchists, and conclusion. And the author knows. This is a write-up of my talk at the 2015 Anarchist Book Fair. It is based off my notes, and so will not be exactly the same as the event, but it is like close enough. The meeting summarized initially submitted for the program was: anarchists and anarchism has a lot of nonsense written about them over years. Whether it's proclaiming that we want chaos or see revolution as an easy process, the conventional wisdom, the quotes conventional wisdom, is often at odds with reality. This applies to individual anarchists, with Proudhon painted as an advocate of labor notes. Actually, you know what, I can actually, well, Joseph Proudhon is the guy getting credited for coming up with mutualism, which is kind of like market anarchism, as it were. It's still stateless and it's still anti-capitalism, but they're still markets. I guess in that sort of sense, I should read up more about it, because that might be a good transition in period from late stage neoliberal capitalism. And thank you for the follow, JJ1610. Thanks so much. You're following random geeky stuff. That's what I was saying. The pure choice of pronoun might be in favor of labor notes. I'm not sure, but that seems like with like mutualism, that might be the sort of thing to do. But I'm talking out my ass here about mutualism because I do understand that like it's market anarchism, as I was saying. It's still anti-state, it's still anti-capitalism, it's socialism, so still all good for me. I just kind of like. But it kind of like if like it says like let the markets decide, handle the luxuries. That's the word. Things that we have determined that are actually not necessary necessities, and everyone gets the access to all of the like necessities of life. Some of that. So already mutualism says a lot of good things in my book, and I think that might be a good bridge from where we are now, since it still has markets, still has currency, still has like it still has transactions and things like market. It still has markets, and so it still feels close to like what people are used to. And then we can use that as a transitional period across generations into communism, which is what I advocate for, communism. But I'm an anarcho-syndicalist too, which that can also be used as a transitional period. I'm getting a bit off topic right now. Let's get French with the syndicalists of workers unites. Yes, exactly. But I'll continue on with the just the introduction to this essay. Kropotkin, a gentle prince of non-violence who had an idealistic vision of social revolution. This is not true. Anarchism and anarchists here have a coherent and practical vision of both social change and a better, not perfect, society. Iain McKay, author of Anarchist FAQ, as he explodes some of the common myths about anarchism and anarchists. There's like, I don't think that's actually written as it's supposed to be. I think it should be as he explores some of the common myths about like anarchism and anarchists. But as it's written out, as B explodes some of the common myths about the anarchism and anarchists. Let's get French with the syndicalist workers unites. And as I think it seems context as a word, but like there's probably like a good strong sense of unions and like workers co-ops and that sort of thing that's happening in France, which I think that's what JJJ 1610 is like getting at as it were. It seems strange as the way they put it. Yeah, exactly. But still, workers unite. After all, what's very common across like not just France but across Europe is like workers' contracts. France had a big unionism during the 1930s. Yeah, exactly. The funny thing you mentioned that like NaztheNeko makes sense. I was thinking 11 Minutes Raw, something like that. Basically, when I would like spam the various links of people who like need the money or something like that, people would like say that like I'm the modern day version of like who's the guy in the beginning, the pro like that steals bread as to like feed someone thus. I'm that guy. I'm the modern version of that guy essentially. Because yes, I probably would go to jail to like steal bread in order to like feed people. John Valjean. Yes, exactly. NaztheNeko. Trotsky influences U.S. workers' unions during that time in Mexico. Oh, okay. We should look into like more of the leftist like movements in like Latin America as it were. I know about like the U.S.'s involvements in Latin America. That I know quite a bit about. It's all terrible, basically. But the actual leftist movements in Latin America, I should look into. I did read the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That is a good book. I did like that book a lot. But anyway, I can continue on with the essay. The meeting itself was well attended with some good questions and discussions after my talk. Attendees seemed to be like happy with it, but it is up to the reader to determine whether they're talking about the expectations of the summary. And that was the summary, and so let's actually go to... I guess these are kind of like transcripts of like this panel or talk at the London Book Fair, I believe. Was it yeah, yes. The 2015 London Anarchist Book Fair. And I know there was, I think there is actually a Seattle Anarchist Book Fair as well. But like, of course, like with the pandemic, the recent events have been like canceled. That's why. But anyway, on to myths about anarchism. There's so much nonsense written about like anarchism that it's hard to know where to start. While this applies across the political spectrum, perhaps needless to say, Marxists are particularly prone to like write completely inaccurate articles, but at least these are easy to refute as they just repeat themselves by regurgitating the nonsense written by the likes of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. I'll stop here and add my little bit of it. When I was listening to an audiobook of like, what was the, I think it was Scientific Socialism by Frederick Engels, and take a Comrade Tegret, I won't hydrate with that. I will do a posture check as well. I will hydrate for this. This is the actual water with mayo and like ice, because it's not that hard outside, but I still like to remain cool. I do have the window closed to like not have like outside noise as it is. And now posture check. Oh yes, and if people like I don't notice, yes, this oh yeah, my name is actually kind of in the way. Yes, this says Junes. It is just like from Persona 4. Every day is great at your Junes. Okay, and JMM16s in chat says, like, when they point that myth of anarchism as chaos, it's like calling witches evils, mere prejudices. Exactly. And I know that some witches, there are many cool witches, actually, honestly. That reminds me of that book by Vidici, Caber and the Witch. I really got to read that one. I did find a PDF of that one. But anyway. Oh yeah, that's like my point for Frederick Engels, and I think the introduction to scientific socialism, it might be the Principles of Communism, is one of those Frederick Engels books. Is he seems to just really, it's kind of like the anti-authoritarians, he called them, and he thinks that we're naive, and I'm just like, I'm sorry that we question like people's authority, as it were. But again, like Mikhail Bakunin said, do I reject all authority? Perish the thought. In the matters of bootmakings, I will consult the expertise of the bootstrapper. We're a fan of expertise. We will consult the expertise, as it were. Just that, like, what we hate is like, do it because I say so. But I'll continue on. So back to the essay. I think the biggest is that anarchism is just anti-state. As I will show, this is not remotely the case, but it is. I think the biggest myth which produces the biggest confusion. First, however, I will discuss some of these other more obviously and silly myths. Unfortunately, what I'm drinking like here is black cherry kickstart. So it's like carbonated, so it's not great for me talking because the tiny little bubbles are going to like stick in my throat. It can constantly be harsh. But screw it, it's black cherry kickstart, and I like black cherry, and I like Mountain Dew kickstart. Yeah, I think this will go really good with like rum or vodka. I do got vanilla vodka. That would go really good with it. Anyway, off topic and back to the essay. General myths. The first started section, general myths. The most obvious general myth is that anarchism equals chaos. Seriously, who in their right mind wants chaos? Well, I know of like one streamer, Necronomicon, who calls herself the Agent of Chaos, as it were, but that's in jest, as it were. And actually, she did kind of like ask this question to me in one of my streams, as it were. Because I think she's just like, why do people think of like Joker from The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's Joker, as a anarchist, as it were? And just because of this general miscomprehension of like anarchism and evil chaos. So I'll continue with the essay. Not anarchist. Yet this myth is interesting as it says more about current society than it does about anarchism. After all, what is chaos? It is a situation where anyone can coerce anyone else as much... I'll start that sentence over again. It is a situation where anyone can coerce anyone else as much as he as can get away with. This is ruling them. Chaos equals everyone acting like a state or boss. Or in other words, the state is legal chaos, just legal coercions and rules as defined by itself. Oh, I like that. I like pointing that out. I love that. And I'll imagine some people will quibble about this definition of the chaos, as it were. Well, I definitely think we can all say that, like, no, it's kind of like no one wants to be like coerced or anything like that. But yet, liberals do think that like a nation states is a good thing. But it's kind of like, well, then you're asking for legal chaos, as it were. Oh, by the way, don't forget that like chaos is still happening within a state of society. Look at it in like a protest that's happened over the past year and a half. Look at all the look at the Ferguson uprising, Standing Rock, and so on like that. There's still chaotic things that happen, even when there's supposed to be no chaos since we're on the state. So people just really have like either a form of cognitive dissonance or just like, you know, they don't think that part of their brain as like they're doing this sort of things, which is kind of true. There's a lot of people that will believe one thing, saying like Sunday school or something like that, but then believe another thing when they're in biology class, and that's a very true thing, and for like many people across the world, as it were. So that's how like someone can be. So that's how some of these people can like. They believe these two things at like once, like anarchism and EO's chaos, but no, that's not. But it's chaos. It's fine that chaos happens in this things because we can still reform the system, as well. Anyway, continue on with the essay. Hence the old anarchist saying that government is chaos, anarchy is order. Ooh, I gotta remember that. Oh, especially since like there's a lot of chaotic things that the government does do. Oh, and a lot of terrible things that the government does do. I mean, the U.S. is not the only terrible government that is out there. There's, of course, like France. France has has like lockdowns, as it were, because of the pandemic. Or at 6 p.m. Tories, exactly, from like the U.K. Absolutely, they do terrible things with like austerity programs. Because, off topic, but like the other day, I listened to someone who said, I know some people who are Trump supporters that are good people. I didn't say anything because, like, no politics in that chat. Or didn't say anything further. But I'm just like, no, there's no good. There are no good people that are Trump supporters. And I asked another streamer, the gaming archaeologist who's in the UK. Go ahead and shout out the gaming archaeologist. Gaming archaeologist is cool. But I gotta make sure I spell archaeologist correctly. So I'm gonna go to Twitch to do that. Waste time in doing that. Where is he? Hold on. I'm sorry. I'll find it out later. Oh wait, here I am. Actually, I can actually like click the links there and copy a link. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Actually, I'll copy a link and paste it. There's the Game Archaeologist at Twitch channel. Because I'm dyslexic, so like archaeologist will be one is like, how can I figure that out? That's like three vowels next to each other. The Tories are so bad that they made austerities shut down the archaeologist departments. Wow! The Tories are bad that they made the universities shut down the archaeology departments. Wow! And I think it's like the UK governments would probably love the archaeology departments because they can like go into like other countries and then like take all those like priceless relics and like artifacts and like take them away and put them in their own museums as well. there's still several artifacts that are that belong in a museum, I guess, that from Greece that are in London, in the UK, as it were, and many people in London are saying like, no, return that to Greece, as it were. So the point is, like, I asked the gaming archaeologists of like, are there any good person that are a supporter of the Tory government, the Tories, or Boris Johnson? To which he even said, "Is that supposed to be a joke?" And it's just like, no, it's no. It's like, if you are a good person, by supporting the Tories or the Republicans in America, or any kind of like conservative party, or like Trump or something like that, despite the qualities you have as being a good person, and that's negated by the governments that you support, as it were, or the political parties you support, as it were. And just like, there's probably there are distinctions between conservatives and fascists. Yes, there are distinctions there. It's just like, generally speaking, fascists, most often, not always, most often don't vote for non-conservatives. But anyway, that was kind of like a bit of a tangent there, so back to the essay. The next big one is that anarchism is against organization. Okay, I have to take a moment and just do this face palm. Ugh. This is that something that Frederick Engels also said? It's just Frederick Engels thinking that us anarchists are just like naive children. Anyway, no, this is not. No. But I'm going to continue on the essay because I bet like Iain McKay explains it. This is suggested by some people who would like expect to know better. Indeed, I remember reading an academic author proclaiming Max Stirner. I'll say right here, right now, Max Stirner's a bit of a knob, but back to the essay. The academic author proclaiming Max Stirner was not an anarchist because he was in favor of organization, his union of egoists. So anarchists were apparently even more individualistic than the arch egoist himself. Let's So, and I will also still say this about my Max Stirner and egoist. They're comrades. They're still comrades. And it's just like kind of like the differences is more philosophical differences. It's not like egoist wants a totally different like society than like Marxist Leninists do against like an anarchist. Marxist Leninists and anarchists in some ways like at some point are not going to like get along too much because we want different societies as well. Egoists are, I think, pretty much want the same kind of society. Granted, anarcho-primitives, they also want a different society, and like those other anarchists as well. And I don't agree with anarcho-primitives at all. It's because no, reverting back to a hunter-gatherer society, no, absolutely terrible idea. No, we're not doing that. We're not. I'm not. And I'm not that big on anti-civilization either. It's like, yeah, I understand the problems environmentally about like the electricity grid and that sort of thing. But I think at this point, which is kind of like say that like, the whole world is now on an electric grid, and the whole world is connected by the internet, or for the most part, and the whole world is connected by the internet. So we're just going to like, and we're just going to like have to accept that, but like live with it, as it were. JJ 1610, and no one knows how to like go back to hunter gatherer. Anyway, I do agree. There are some people that do that, and more power to them. But that's the thing, you got the able body to be able to go back to hunter gatherer and scavenger society. That's another key point that we often forget to like left out, is that you scavenge a lot. When you watch like Bear Grylls or all those other survivor shows, and then even the actual grubs, as it were, or anything like that. Yeah, that's what you probably have to like do if you like as far from being from civilization. That's what you have to do. But yeah. Yeah, but it's just so strange. But like Max Stirner wanting in favor of organization and unions of EOS, totally makes sense, and that's kind of fitting with anarchism. That's where I don't know what this academic person was thinking. Back to the essay, to the next paragraph. Sometimes you have to conclude that such claims are driven by political needs. For example, one Marxist graphic guide to Marx rightly noted that Bakunin warned against the dangers of the abuse of power in the so-called workers' state, but then immediately proclaimed Bakunin was against all forms of organization. You cannot help but conclude that this nonsense was written and to stop people looking at the libertarian socialist alternative for what a sensible person will look into Bakunin's ideas after reading that. Okay, my comment here is like, yeah, I think I agree with Iain McKay. And it's just like, because he points out Mikhail Bakunin, they had to poison the well before people can look into libertarian socialism and look into Mikhail Bakunin's ideas. Now, I will say that Mikhail Bakunin, terrible person for being as anti-Semitic as he is. I will still read his writings. I read The Principles of the State. I think the capitalist system that essay he wrote is still pretty good and still holds up. It really still holds up today. And God and State is pretty good too. And actually quite short for one of those texts. I think some of the Bakunin's ideas and writings and his contribution as it were, because even though Mikhail Bakunin and Karl Marx did kind of have were frenemies as it were, just there was rivalry, they had their disagreements, and there's also the big thing of the dismantling of the First Internationale. Oh, that was big. And basically, the anarchists and the non-statist socialists and communists, and the socialists and communists that are in more favor states, we've never repaired that rift. It's been 180 years, or no, what? It's 1870s when the First International was disbanded, because that's what the anarchists and the statists. The Frederick Engels and Karl Marx did some backroom deals to sabotage that thing, honestly, or just knew the anarchists weren't getting along with it, but forcing them to make a photo or something like that. It's not good. That riff has not been repaired in the past 150 years. With that all said, Marxist-Leninists, Marxist-Leninist and Marxists for sure, are still comrades, because it's the kind of thing. It's just on certain situations that we can both agree on, like capitalism, then we can agree to work together on repairing things and new practices were. But again, we have different ideas of what societies we are in favor of. Very different ideas. And also, now we may agree on the same conclusion and the same ultimate society of communism, but we disagree on how to get there. Anyway, then there's a lot of history of Marxist Leninists and Marxist Leninist betraying and backstabbing and generally not supporting of anarchist endeavors as war. Not saying that all anarchists are angels as well, because I mentioned about Mikhail Bakunin, he was an anti-Semite. Pierre Joseph Proudhon, he was a patriarch. So anyway, continue on. In reality, anarchists have thought about organization from the start. We are against specific form of organization, namely those which are hierarchical, authoritarian, centralized, top-down. As in the capitalist workplace or state, we are for specific forms of organization, namely self-management, decentralized, federal, bottom-up, which ends the divisions between rulers and rule. Thus, we find that Proudhon argued for social economic federations based on workers' controls to end wage labor. That is, the selling of labor and liberty to a boss, as well as the elections, mandating and recall of delegates to end the state. That is, delegating power to the few governors. He advocated a libertarian social organization rooted in federalism and contract free agreements, collective self-rule within free associations. And then so because like this was asked to me on Social Justice Alchemy, SJA. We are going to do the show tomorrow. We'll cover some whatever things that comes to our heads and talking about. But we had I guess on almost a year ago, several months ago, Aaron Benowitz, who's the host of the two podcasts, Embrace the Void and like Philosophers in Space. He is a John Rawls, a liberal philosopher. He's an ethicist. He's a professor of ethics philosophy, and he doesn't like the idea of an anarchist society from what little he understands about anarchist society, because of the lack of social contract. I think right there, which that Perdon has laid out, he advocating for libertarian social organizations rooted in federalism and contracts, free agreements, and collective self-rule within free associations. That's what you got with like a social contract, as it were, and more or less like they almost like to be in the good neighbor thing, which a lot of Americans are kind of in favor of anyway, even conservative ones. That's because like, hey, you need some salt, or hey, you need some sugar, as it were, or at least that's what the meme says, or the idiom does. So that's the kind of like the social contract we have. Just like make sure that everyone has their needs taken care of. That's it. It's more. But I'll continue on with the rest of the essay because there might be like more points that the Iain McKay already brings up. Anarchists didn't recognize that. Continuing with the essay, anarchists didn't recognize that cooperation does not equal coercion, and so Engels, in his awful on authority, was wrong in equating agreement with authority. This is liberal nonsense, and anarchists have long argued that freedom is a product of association, not isolation. So it is how we associate, how we organize, which is important. Which brings me to the next myth, namely that anarchism is a fusion of liberalism and socialism. I have my thoughts. But I think Iain McKay is going to actually like explore those sort of things already. I will tell you that like, yes, socialism, that's part of anarchism, that's where, and like generally not always though, but most anarchists are communists as well, or a lot, or at least quite a few of them are. But there's some anarchists that are just socialists though. To be fair. But continuing on, this is wrong for anarchism is a socialist, egalitarian, a critique of like a state and capitalism. Yeah, exactly. Continuing on, its main influences was Rousseauism. Rousseau's is critiques of liberalism and workers' movement. Liberalism was only featured in terms of anarchist critiques of Malthusianism's economics and the class-ridden society it produced. I think I heard this sort of things in the other like essays I read by Kropotkin and like Bakunin. This were because like Malthusianisms did came up in like those writings and Tolstoy as well. JJ 1610 in the chat is classic rebuck of the saying that it's liberal nonsense when they don't have anything else. Yes, exactly. Let's continue on with the essay. It is worthwhile to reminding ourselves that the classical liberalism is not very liberal in the modern sense. It justifies a voluntary subjugation, voluntary authority, exploitation, and so on. However, is the problem with slavery or dictatorship really that they are not voluntary? Yes, according to libertarianism, i.e. proprietarianism, Robert Nozick, who is echoing classical liberal John Locke. No, according to anarchists like Proudhon and Bakunin, who opposes the wage labor liberalism defended. It's like, people don't understand what like all those words means. It's like, Yeah, liberals and liberalism is one of those words that like Americans cannot use unless they know what they actually mean. But unfortunately, what's the problem is like it's so many Americans are going to think that liberals means left. And yes, liberals are to the left of conservatives and to the left of the GOP party. Liberalism itself is not left; it's centrist. Continuing on. But to continue on with the rest of the essay, just as anarchism is socialist and not liberalism, the next myth is that anarchism is individualism. While this is popular with Marxists, it's baseless and simple that shows their ignorance. At the forefront of producing ignorance, Marxist distortions about anarchism was how Doppers, who proclaim anarchism the most anti-democratic ideology there is. I have to stop there. I have to laugh. I was like, what? Anarchism is the most anti-democratic ideology? I think anarchism is the most democratic ideology. We advocate for direct democracy. Yeah. I think that pretty much it, Jay. Yeah, they'll just blame the commies again. Oh, man. Anarchism, the most anti-democratic ideology, and Iain McKay continues on in this paragraph. Really? So monarchy or dictatorship is more democratic than anarchism? Is party dictatorship implemented by, and advocated by Lenin and Trotsky are more democratic? It just makes you wonder what Dopper understands by democratic. Yes. Yes, Emilio Montoya would say to Hal Dopper about like democracy. It's like, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Maybe it's because to them mob rule is not democracy. I do think that, don't they? Because when I ever advocate for direct democracy, they say, "Oh, how are we going to stop mob rule?" And it's just like, that just shows their mistrust of other humans. Just pure and simple. Well, human beings are shit. Okay, then why do we elect them to the positions of power then if they're shit? They don't have an answer to that. Or it's just like, this is the system what we have now. Oh, so you just don't want to change the system because it's too much work for you. That's really what it is. No, some liberals who actually say, "Oh, it's too hard to change to get rid of electoral college as it were because it takes too much work and something like that." And so it's kind of like, so that's them saying, so it's not worth doing, is it? So it's not worth doing any of that, is it? So why do anything? Hey, if it's too hard, then why do anything? Continuing on. Yes, anarchists aren't in favor of individuality, individual liberty, free association. I'd also free autonomy, as it were, because I think it's Eric about Tesla. I think, and like Anarchy, that excellent pamphlet I probably should read as well. It's not like it's that, or in the anarchist program. I should read that too. That. Anarchism and anarchy is about like giving full autonomy to the individual, as it were, and we believe and imply that like through full liberty, full individuality, and free autonomy, and full autonomy and free association, something like that, that others will do good things for like others, and so on. And if they don't, the hope is that like other people will pick up the slack. At least this is me speaking. That other people do pick up the slack, because doing something for the sake of doing something good, or for the good of others, or for the good of the community, is a powerful enough incentive, I say. So let's see. I'll continue on now. Continue on with the rest of the paragraph. However, we draw egalitarian or democratic conclusions from these, and not classic liberal ones. We recognize that social organization does not equate the state, and so are looking for associations in which free internal as well as like free to join. I'm going to pause here, and I think like this is I'm mentioning Not sure. But I'm imagining that so many people will make the mistake of thinking that social organization is the state or equates the state. And that's not the case. And I think I have to just spell it out to people. It's just like when we anarchists talk about the state, we're talking about it's defined usually as like the group of people that has the monopoly of violence, monopoly of sanctioned violence, as it were. But case in point, it would be like the police state, or like having police officers would enforce the rule of law, as it were. Do you betray the law? Law! Yeah, that sort of thing. Law and order, as it were. Whose laws and what order? And this is something that I've tried before to try to instill into liberals, as it were. That no, the state is coercive and and abusive. I mean, accepted. Yeah, exactly. JJ 1610. Social organization in anarchism is commune, not state. Yes, exactly. Free association and that sort of thing as well. But I think it's because liberals I tried to point this out. Okay, back in the pandemic, when it was rampant, fall of last year, as it were, when we still have not gotten vaccines, as it were. It was still unsafe to reopen the schools, but yet some states still reopen schools anyway. Sometimes they did it half and half, but other times it's kind of if the other parents did not want to send their kids to school for the reasonable understanding that it'd be dangerous to do so because of the pandemic, if they do that and don't show that they do proper homeschooling or something like that, if they allow their kids to stay at home, but yet the state is demanding that they go to school or something like that, then those parents can be in jail for truancy. And I tried to point this out to C. Shives in one of my Ask Away questions to him, and he was kind of like, "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure." So, because I can definitely believe that Chief Shives was ignorant about truancy laws and how the punishments are. But that was my point. Is that if the state wanted to, they can enforce those truancy laws, and that's something that actually Kamala Harris talked about when she was DA for San Francisco. Is that yes, the state can come down and force you parents to send your kids to school or else you go to jail, as it were, and that's where it's the state has the power and the authority to do that, authority over others, and that's kind of an example I showed to you that that state has power over us, and just because most of the times you're not affected by that power differential doesn't mean the power differential isn't there, and it's an injustice where JJ in the chats said that federal government passing the buck of failures to state levels. Nothing goes well on the state level. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But I think it's a people just liberals just and other statist socialists who are just really think that any form of social organization is a state, and that's just that's just the confusion there. That social organization is a state if it's forcing you to join it or forcing you to accept obey by their laws by force. I swear, that's how to define it. It'll be like the mafia. It's like the mafia. This is a nice place you got here. I don't know what accent this is, but it'd be a shame if something bad happens to it. The police are kind of like mafia in a way as well. They just run a protection ring. It's just it's not us paying them protection and period. It's our taxes, and then the city councils and other local government ordinances are too scared to stand up to the police, and so they'll say, yeah, whatever you want. They'll increase your budget, even with all that has happened the past year about police brutality. But that's I'm going a bit off topic right now. By the way, anyway, I gotta continue on. Individualism, in contrast, individualism, in contrast, justifies authoritarian organization, while for anarchists, individual freedom implies self-management organizations and not hierarchical ones like the state or capitalist workforce. Yes, I agree, totally, 100%. Like I said, it's just Anarchists really just have like that faith in humanity. That's where when you give them free autonomy, you give them free association, you give them the ability to just leave if they want to, but come back or something like that because we have cookies. Is that like no? We will all work together to take care of all of our needs when we need to, and help out to those that don't. That's part of communism, from each according to their ability, and to each according to their need. And that's we will things will manage well. It's not perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect society, but we mentioned that like it would be a much more freer society than as opposed to the state-run society. And again, it's just like just because you're lucky that you're not in face of the repression of the state does not mean that the state's oppression is still there. Alright, continuing on. There's an element of truth in the arguments anarchists are anti-democratic, simply because history has shown that the majority can be wrong and oppressed. This means that minority rights, freedom to protest, freedom to experiment, and so on are important not only in themselves as a defense of freedom, but also as to ensure social evolution. This means that anarchists argues for majority decisions and making freely joined associations, but against majority rule. That's an interesting passage, but I'll continue on. Needless to say, while the majority can be oppressive, we recognize that minority rule is oppressive. Whether politically, dictatorships, monarchy, or economically, feudalism or capitalism, anarchists recognizes that while the majority needs not outright no minority, even elected ones by a majority, can be trusted and not to abuse its positions. Oh yeah, 100% agree there. Some of the part of it was kind of like thought, oh, that's interesting. No, it says okay, yeah, okay, I see. Hey, so basically, in this part, it's like that. There's the element of truth that anarchists are anti-democratic simply because the history has shown the majority can be wrong and oppressive. That's right. So when the majority rules, if the majority says no, gay marriage is not around because the majority thinks homosexuality is a sin or something like that, that's a terrible majority rule source of thing too, because that goes against human rights. We anarchists believe that human rights are not up to debate whatsoever, not a debate of rule of law, not a debate period. We're just no. Even if the majority rule against that, no, we're not ruling against we're not ruling against human rights. So that's where minority rights can come in there as well. Okay, I read that part. So now I'm gonna go to the next section, next paragraph. From what has been said so far, it is clear that sadly too common. It is clear that the sadly too common notion that anarchism is just anti-state is a myth. This is a popular one with both Marxists and proprietarianisms for obvious reason, but it overlooks a significant aspect of anarchism. Not least that the first anarchist book was "What is Property" rather than "What is State." That is, its conclude property was theft and both and dispossession. Thus, the property owner was the sovereign over their property and those who use it. This meant that the wage workers sold labor and liberty to bosses, which in turn ensures exploitations happens. From this, Proudhon, like subsequent anarchists, concluded that property had to be abolished by becoming socially owned and managed by the individuals and groups who use it. Workplaces would run by their workers, houses by their tenants, and communities by its members, and so on. I'm going to interject here because this is referring back to Proudhon's, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon's "What is Property?" as well. And there was a massive book that he wrote that says property is theft too. But I think what people get confused, and maybe it's because of houses and by their tendencies were that many people would just have individual homes that were, or at least in America. But yet I live in an apartment, and same thing with a lot of other people. the problem with like the idea of property, we also think like a personal fidget spinner is my property, or like a computer my property, and this goes into this like the myth that the right wing would always think that's like they're going to come in and take your all the stuff and redistribute it on the lawn and say hey, everyone gets a free for all. That's what people rarely do think, unfortunately, and it's kind of like no, and that's where we have to make the distinction of personal property versus private property, as it were. We don't want to take everyone's toothbrushes. That's gross. That's your toothbrushes. That's disgusting. You use it. Is the toothbrush factory. Because if we take over the toothbrush factory, then and it'd be worker owned and control, then we will only build as many toothbrushes as there's an actual need for it. And once there's no longer a need for it, shut down the machines. And there you go. Go home. And yet that's a terrible thing, according to conservatives. I actually had this conversation with the conservatives as well, as I mentioned several times before. It's like, that's terrible. Because if the toothbrush factory is shut down, what are the workers going to do? Spend time with your family. This was a father of 4 that has complained he doesn't have enough time for himself to play like Mass Effect and something like that as he's raising his kids. So it's kind of like he complains about having not enough time in a day, but except as it is, and when I explain socialism to him, worker control owns means production, as it were, and so if we build enough toothbrushes for the need, shut down the toothbrush factory, what's going to happen to those workers? They can go home, spend time with their family, read books. It's like, unless people are, they really do think, unless people are like working like 9 to 5, like for 4 hour, for 5 days a week or something like that, the entire world will shut down. And yet, despite the fact there's like bullshit jobs. Yeah, but that's the distinction of like a personal property and private property, as it were. Or you use it, you own it, and you can use it. I'm using my computer right now. I'm using this Yeti microphone. I'm using this webcam. I'm using this glass. So it's mine for the time being as I'm using it. And so long as like me owning this glass doesn't deprive everyone else of like and owning some other kind of glass, then I think it's fine. Yes, I agree, JJ. JM. Everyone wants to make a career man. Yeah. That's so really good. All right, we're continuing on. Continuing on with the essay. This system of used rights was termed possessions, and it would end wage labor by association. In short, Anarchism has stood for workers' control of the production of factories since 1840. I will also point out, so what is property came out in 1840, before Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote a pamphlet of like manifesto for the Communist Party in 1848. So take that, Marxists! Anarchists have been around before Marxism. Ha! Because Pierre Joseph Proudhon did call himself an anarchist like what is property. To be fair, though, the ideas and principles that Pierre Joseph Proudhon and others, and even Karl Marx and others have like wrote about and stuff like that, those ideas have been around for the longest time possible. And many indigenous cultures have always like advocated by those ideas, but those ideals, they're kind of like, it wasn't like later. It's just like, wait a minute, you white people actually like put a word to it. That's just how we've been doing things. Okay, so that's what we've been doing. But anyway, so continuing on, this analysis of like hierarchical nature of property of capitalism fades into like anarchist critiques of the state. The state defends exploitation and oppression of the many by the few, which property creates. It is an instrument of like class rule to enforce its boss's authorities and cannot be anything else due to its structure, which reflects its role. It cannot be captured by many of the unreformable instruments of the few. Continuing on. So libertarian principles of being and a state and property are intertwined and interlinked. As what about the so-called libertarian right? Does that not show that anarchism is just anti-state? No. For the libertarian, again, this is quotes around libertarian, right, stole the name libertarians from the left in the 1950s America. Apparently, theft is property. Ha! JJN and 16 in the chat says, like, well, they're all the same generation doing, like, the same pub, talking about the same ideas. Yeah, exactly. So continuing on back to the essay, they also defend state-like social relationships, most obviously wage labor and landlordism, and usually support fascism to ensure them. Van Minus says, okay, thank you, Naz. Hydrate. As the back to the essay, Van Mises is used in fascism in the 1920s. Van Hayek supports Pinochet's dictatorship in Chile. Oh yes. Continuing on. This is also surprising if you think that they are generally interested in liberty rather than property, and the power that goes with it as well. Yeah, the libertarian right. They hate the state for driver's licenses, and but yet when you try to ask them questions, because they're all for private property of like a deed, a home ownership of the deed, and so on. But when you try to ask them, okay, who's going to ensure that deed's validity? No, just ask them that basic question. In your libertarian society, who's going to say, yes, this deed is yours? Who's going to do that? Because, yeah, it's just like, oh my god, it sometimes is funny. I'm watching some libertarians just like really be like, and show their fragility for like when you're pointing out, if you have a deed to your private property, something like that, you want that to be insured by like something like an entity or something like that, you're asking for their estate essentially. And JM 16 in the chat says they only hate state because of regulations, and those libertarians, they love the state power to protect capitalism. Oh yeah, absolutely. So they're pro private property, pro capitalist like ownership, they're pro all that. They just mistakenly don't realize that like, no, you need state to like protect all those things. So they still believe in like police forces as well. But it's kind of like private police forces, like RoboCop, as it were, when it's just corporations that have like run those machines and run the police departments as well, or your own private rocket arsenal or nuclear arsenal, as it were. Now imagine, or just like their own gang of like a motorcycle gang of like Hell's Angels with rocket launchers. That's the side. But anyway, continuing on. Anarchists are often portrayed as being utopians, but the notion that anarchists are just about a perfect future world is a myth. Far from it. We're all about like applying our ideas in the here and now. For we recognize that people change through struggle. Hierarchy corrupts in our character, both the rulers and the ruled. While resisting hierarchy improves our character. Indeed, it is the struggle for freedom which makes us able to like live as free individuals. Thus, we create the new world while we fight for the current one. NaztheNeko said, "Wait, when I think of motorcycle gangs, I think of like a Japanese like Yankee Fuko." Wait, is that like one of the Yakuza games? I should play those Yakuza games. Those are the games that seems to be like a lot of fun. I think I have one of them in my Steam library, so I probably should play that. But yeah, it's kind of like, libertarians just like are all for capitalism and like private property capitalism and so on and all that stuff, and they just like think like, oh no, that's all fine. I know. Continuing on. Nor does it mean that an anarchist that thinks everyone will be perfect in a free society. People are not perfect, and there will always be like assholes. Arseholes. It's pronounced. This one is written as arseholes. I kind of like that pronunciation as well. actually. Continuing on. The difference is that like they would not be in positions of power. It becomes it is because people are not perfect that we are anarchists. You cannot give imperfect, flawed people power over others. Hence our arguments for free associations, elections, mandates, and recall. Power corrupts for those at the top of those as below. This is something I don't understand how, like, this is why I hate liberalism, and I just get infuriated by liberals. Liberals just accept so much shit. They just accept so much shit. They just, like, complain about, like, what the Republicans do, what Republicans do, this is what Republicans do, Republicans do, it's just, like, and not realizing that's, like, well, when you give this Senate Majority Leader the power to be able to say, no, this will not be voted on the Senate floor whatsoever, if you get someone in the position of a Senate Majority Leader, like Mitch McConnell, then he will just, like, not let anything pass that is to the left of, like, hurting homeless people for sports. I mean, I pointed out to, like, Steve Shives in, like, One Ask Away, and I'm really upset at Steve Shives by saying that, because he kind of, like, just, like, almost cried on stream, because, like, well, what else are we going to do? What else are we going to do? So he just had to, like, vote to choose Democratic senators in Georgia's special election, and then the Democrats have a slim majority, as it were. Okay, now what's happened? They controlled the Senate, and the 48 Democratic senators, and 2 independent senators that caucus with the Democrats. They controlled the Senate, and they still have control of the House, and they now have President Biden in executive office. They should be able to do whatever they want. Clearly, though, whatever they want is whatever the Republicans agree to do with, or at least Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, or any other conservative Democrat that would have been the Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema at this time. But they don't have to speak out against this sort of things, because Joe Manchin already do that, and that takes a lot of takes a lot of focus onto Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and they can be silent about their actual positions about all this sort of stuff. No, believe me, if Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are just the current ones. There could have been, like, another one. There's several of them. There's several conservative, like, Democrats that, like, do not want to change anything. So, which is why they're never going to get rid of the filibuster, even though the Republicans will use the filibuster much more often to be able to block whatever they want. But that's current U.S. politics, which really upsets me and pisses me off. But the point is that, like, liberals just accept that. They will accept shit. They will just constantly accept shit from the Democratic Party because it's the Democratic Party. They'll bitch and moan and complain about the Republican parties all day long, and the liberal media of, like, New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, something like CNN, and we'll tell them about, like, the terrible things the Republican Party and GOP party does. They do terrible things, don't get me wrong. But then when it's, like, Biden in the White House, it's kind of that meme that leftists were sharing of, like, a middle-aged woman in the cartoon leaning down over into the children in the cage, as it were, and saying, Biden beat Trump in the election, as it were. So pointing out that, like, there's still children in cages and they're Biden. So true right now, honestly, I think. And the immigration has not, like, improved. Yeah, exactly. Both are useless as each other. I agree. And immigration into this country is not improved. That's the campaign promise that Biden neglected on. And but the liberals just accept that because, like, to be fair, at some point, it's just like once it's the general election, it's just like, yeah, there's no other viable options. Biden or, like, Trump again. So they have to go to Biden. Biden did, like, improve things on, like, the COVID-19 front. So that was an improvement. I'm getting a bit off topic, so I'm going to go back to, like, this essay. But that was kind of like the point, is that we're, like, Mitch McConnell be in the position of power, be able to block everything and stuff like that, which is, like, our point. Don't have those positions of powers anyways. Yeah, immigration in this country sucks eggs, yeah. Yep, NaztheNeko, that's absolutely true. Anyway, continuing on. Another myth, although perhaps a more understandable one, is the notion that anarchism is predominant, Bakunism, Kropotkinism, and so on. This is wrong because we do not, like some, name ourselves after like individuals. Individuals, as should be obvious, can be wrong. While Proudhon laid down many of the key ideas of anarchism, he was completely wrong about completely wrong and self-contradictory on his issues of feminism. Proudhon was a patriarch. Continuing. His sexism is a obvious example of why we reject calling ourselves after individuals. No one is completely consistent, and even the best anarchists make mistakes. Kropotkin in the First World War springs to mind. So it is not the case that because a anarchist said it, that it is the anarchist. So it's not. Okay, I'll reread that sentence. So it is not the case that because a anarchist said it that it is anarchist, but rather whether the statement is whether the statement is it's consistent with anarchist principles. Thus, Proudhon's patriarchy was inconsistent with his own principles. Why should the home be excluded from the critique of hierarchy made with regards to the state and property? Similarly, Proudhon's oppositions to strikes is not reflected in the works of Bakunin, Kropotkin, Goldman, and other revolutionary anarchists. Going to go back to Kropotkin in the First World War springs to mind. This is why anarchists criticize each other. I mean, I was just kind of looking for interesting essays to read by a Tesla, and I came across pro-government anarchists. Ooh, that sounds interesting. And Eric Tesla was basically calling up here Kropotkin for being a pro-government anarchist, thinking that during the First World War we have to be pro-government anarchists. We have to be pro-government for the time being because it's important to end this war and the oppression that's the war and that sort of things. And Eric Tesla is okay. If we decide to be pro-government for the time being for the First World War, do you really think that those governments are going to say, "Good job, anarchists, for being pro us this war and supporting us in the war"? No, they won't. They'll go back to oppressing us anarchists and arresting us and putting us in jail and calling us political dissidents and doing horrible things to us because we are still against their government. And so yeah, that was kind of so that's why it's just I think I kind of almost science is a word ideally is that science itself is self-correcting this word. Then when presented with new information, people will change their positions, or we would hope that's the case. And I think it's when pointing out the contradictions, hopefully that Proudhon and Bakunin would and Kropotkin would see the errors of their ways. Sometimes they don't, and they'll just agree to disagree or still stand by the position even when they're contradictory, as it were. Actually, I think many anarchists kind of say something about Emma Goldman's statement that if voting actually did anything, they would make it illegal. Because, in the context of the time that, Emma Goldman said this, which was, late 1800s and the early 1900s, as it were, because, she lived during the time of the suffragette movements, the movement that trying to give, women the vote. Emma Goldman, being a woman and a feminist, actually disagreed with that because she just didn't think that, women should participate in the political process whatsoever, since the state itself is oppressive. But nowadays, and even Rudolf Rocker said that participating in parliamentary politics is to ruin this delusion because it defeats self-else and indicates people from believing in the ruinous delusions that salvation comes from above. I totally butchered that passage from Narco-Syndicalism Theory and Practice. I have to read it off the top of my head or find it again. But there. But whenever I would post that Emma Goldman quote of if democracy would, if voting was actually change anything that would make it illegal today, and I got some pushback from that from other leftists actually, which is fair because right now they actually are making voting illegal in the United States, in Texas, in Georgia, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania. Republicans in those states legislatures are trying to restrict voting rights absolutely, and they had done so before. Voter suppression is widely a thing; it's a widespread thing, and they really are trying to make it illegal to vote in some ways. making it more difficult to vote, and thus like suppressing the vote of largely black people in the United States, because they often like vote against the GOP party. And the GOP party right now, it seems like don't want to like JJ 1610 is like they're even doing a voter suppression in Britain. Yeah. And I guess the Tories are the same as the GOP, as in where they're just like, they're not trying to get new voters. They're not going to change their positions or their policies to get new voters. They're just going to like, stick to the same small voter base that they have, which is small and dwindling. Not just because of like some disenfranchisement, and some people like actually will switch from being Republican to being a Democrat and not change any of their political party, the policies or positions, because you know what, they can, honestly. Or so, but it's not only just like defection, but it's also death. It's a morbid thing to say, but it's actually true. It's like many of them are growing old, and just like growing old and dying. And so, and honestly, that's why I think that's what I'll say of that. Like, there's going to be a seismic change politically when all the baby boomer generation dies, because then it'll be Gen X will be the grandfather grandfather generation, but then the millennials will be in power, and oh yes. Survey after survey has shown that millennials are just more, at least in favor of socialism as well. JMN 1610 in chat says like, nah, it's more that the liberals losing voters. Tories are stable. Ah, yes, more folks are turning to third parties. Okay, yeah, that's the thing. At least with the UK, there are viable third parties as were. Unfortunately, in the United States of America, because we have first past the post and we're going to take all, it makes it almost nearly impossible for like a third party to like gain any traction. The most that third parties can do, like green parties or social alternative can do, is get like local elections of like mayor, city council members, and maybe even state representatives. That's where, or maybe 1 or 2 congressmen. It's like, but it's like, but with first past the post, this where is just like, so there would be massive voter reforms. And right now, even on national level, the Democrats and Biden do not want to give her the filibuster to do the HR1 bill, or even the John Lewis voters' rights, which is a compromise, but like it'll be better. But that's kind of like my point. Is just like time and place. Yeah, what Goldman said about like voting would have been like something to be said, but like it's not as applicable now. So continuing on, thinkers are part of like a wide movement and gain influences because they chime in with it. They lose that influence when they no longer do, as Kropotkin found out in 1914. And so we reject the idea that quoting individual anarchists is sufficient to define anarchism. Yet for all that, there are individuals who work well define. Whose work help define and shape anarchism, and it is useful to discuss them associated with specific individuals, for these will help debunk some of the common myths about anarchists and shots. JM in 1610 and chat, that's how the Tories won, by middle past as the post with coalitions with the DUP. Yeah. Also, it's just like, so JM16. A while ago, just out me, we invited two of our friends that are British, and actually from the north, and one person that's American but lives in Britain, to talk about Keir Starmer and how he has done after the first year of being the leader of the Labour Party. And it was an interesting discussion. We in the middle of that, we several times over kind of meandered to look at quite a bit of a different topics of war. But I think it was quite interesting to say, because it's safe to say Keir Starmer is just like Tony Blair in the way. It's just way too corporate, way too centrist, agreeing with the Tories and Margaret Thatcher. And Tony Blair agreed with Margaret Thatcher on a lot of economic issues, and Tony Blair was being anti-left anyway as well. Rather would talk to a fascist and not to a leftist, honestly. And when you think of them, and we on the panel all agree it's just Keir Starmer is just more of that, of a corporate Labour Party leader, and very much as centrist and pro-corporate, pro-capitalism. It's pretty much like only like in some like social policies is that like Keir Starmer has opposed the Boris Johnson Tories on. Anyway, continue on. Now to the new section of like myths about anarchism. Myths about like yep, that's very true. Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly. JM 16. Tony Blair is Britain's Rumsfeld. Yes, exactly. Total war criminal. Tony Blair. Exactly. Oh yes. Yes, he was. Tony Blair was 100% with like George W. Bush in the Iraq War. It's just like, well, the rest of the world kind of like would have like Afghanistan be their own version of the Iraq War. It's just like, why do we have Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan? We weren't hit, or it's been years now. We're still there. So with that, no, even for the Iraq War, which many people are like, why go there? Why are you going there? France was like, why the hell go there? That was the only good thing that PM did, was not go to Iraq. Tony Blair went to Iraq, and it's just like, wow. Lockstep in like a total in the handshake friendship with like George W. Bush into Iraq. And here's the thing: I was political when I was in high school because when I was in high school, September 11th happened and Iraq War happened my senior year. So I was political when I was in high school, and you know what? I'm 37 now, and I've gone further left since then, as I'm now a narco-syndicalist. So that whole notion is like, when you grow up, this was said to me actually on my stream, when I was on one of my political streams. Someone came in and said, when you're going to grow old, you're going to look back at the liberal stuff and BS in your bio, at your liberal BS and be ashamed of yourself. I'm like, what liberal BS? What you mean in my bio? What? First of all, I'm not a liberal. I'm narco-syndicalist, so don't smear me being a liberal. As well. To which this person said, oh, that's even worse. It's like, okay, block you. But yet people do believe that like as you grow old you become more conservative, and it's just like, I don't see that happening. Peter Kropotkin was like, they died in his like 80s, I think, as an anarchist. So it's like, no, that's not actually true. And Peter Kropotkin was a fucking prince. He was an aristocrat. He had a privileged life, but he gave up those privileges to be geologist and anthropologist? No, biologist. He was a scientist, and kind of like through many of those things, he became an anarchist. Anyway, but now going back to the essay in the next section, myths about like individual anarchists. Fittingly, I will start with Pierre Joseph Proudhon, who in 1840 proclaimed himself an anarchist. There are many myths about Proudhon, and then these are in the main due to a lack of translation of his voluminous output and unreliable commentaries, like Marx. Okay. I don't have to go on about this because I did know about this, because in one of my other streams, it's not on my Twitch channel anymore. I have to re-upload to my YouTube channel. My socials will contain my YouTube channel. I should really get back to re-uploading my political VODs onto YouTube, because yes, reading Rudolf Rocker's Marx and Anarchism. Oh yes, Rudolf Rocker did all the work, laid it all out there that Karl Marx moved to socialism because of the writings of Pierre Joseph Proudhon. But then later in Karl Marx's life, he rejected a lot of Pierre Joseph Proudhon's writings of the work. Oh fucking hell. Okay. I should be back now. Just gonna do, yes, it says I'm live, and it's gonna, that's, I'm not gonna limit, and what if I just refresh, so we're, it's saying, no, that's a video, there we go, it's what, yeah, network error, come on. There we go. Okay. Yes. Okay. I wanted to actually be sure that where I kind of watch myself from Twitch, so to know that I'm actually reconnected. I probably am going to quote tweet my own tweet and says I am back. I am back. On. Or internet is back. Okay, internet restored. I did have to think for a little bit. How do I spell restore? Because like I am dyslexic. Oh, thank you for the follow. Where is it? Okay, I'm not sure if like that's in the person. Okay, there we go. Copy that link. Copy the positive. Yeah, exactly. I did have to think for store. Okay, so there's my quote tweet. I'm saying that like I'm back on, so you can go ahead and like I'll retweet that. And so we're okay, and so let's get back into it. I actually don't know of like when I went off a line, as it were, when it happened, because I imagine it happened in 30 seconds, as it were. So I'm just going to like reread this part of the new section of where myths about like individual anarchism. Fitting, I start with Pierre Joseph Proudhon, who in 1840 proclaimed himself an anarchist. Yes, he was the first one to do it. There are many myths about Proudhon, and these are in the main due to the lack of translation of his voluminous outputs and unreliable commentaries like Marx. Yes. So if you want to know all about that, just read Marx and Anarchism by Rudolf Rocker. I highly recommend that essay. I read it on my channel. I should re-upload to my YouTube channel. It will be great. Continue on. It's sufficient to say Marx. Excuse me. Reread that. Sufficient to say, Marx did not refute him in The Property of Philosophy. That book is a hatch job, and there is simply too much nonsense within to go into here. As an example, Marx simply asserts Proudhon advocated labor notes, and failed to mention the numerous passages which shows that this is not the case. Proudhon, regardless of Marx's implications, did not oppose those large-scale industry, nor did he advocate small-scale property. In fact, his theory reflects the rise of industry, rather than ignore or deplore it, by arguing for workers' associations, cooperatives to run workplaces. Nor was he an individualist, for he recognizes that the groups were greater than the sum of their parts, due to what he termed collective force. Groups were as real as the individuals who made it up of it. So these had to be like self-managed to ensure its group reflects individuals and their ideas. He also saw the need for wide-scale organizations in the form of federationism and of self-governance associations in both society and communes, or self-governing communities, and the economy, associated labor, self-management workplaces. He even argued for a democratic armed forces where soldiers elected their officers. Now, I like that idea, as it were, because like the soldiers electing their officers, as it were, that's some workplace democracy, as it were. I mean, the idea of like there being a position of a supervisor, a lead, or a manager, or several of them, honestly, that can still work, as it were. But like the point is like we rather it to be, voted on by everyone else instead of like we hired this person to be the manager, as it were, because a lot of times you'll get like supervisors and managers that are hired outside and you don't know that person, and they come up to you and say, "Hi, I'm now your new boss," and just like, okay, I have to like listen to you and like obey your commands, as it were, at the workplace, so long they're reasonable, I guess, for the most part, because that's their arrangement, as it were. And so even like advocating for the soldiers to be able to do that, yeah, that is something. Because granted, I can understand that like in certain time and places that for there to be some kind of like authoritarianism that like follow these rules in certain situations, life and death situations, for example, that can be usefulness. An example American Johnson did in one of his like videos said like how anarchism works. It says like on a ship, like a fishing ship, I got the Barren Seas. Yeah, exactly, JMM 1610. Most bosses have no clue about the actual work. my God, the account manager or the new product manager I work with literally did not know about something. And I say, it's like, no, 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 you're asking me to get you this part. This doesn't work. Well, what about the other part? It's like, okay, this is how it works. This part gets kicked into like this part and another ticket, then be some ticket, and then come to this, and then will be delivered. So like, that's how it works, as it were. And I'm the person that get paid $17.67 an hour, and his title is like warehouse clerk too, and I work in the stockroom. This person's probably salary is like they get paid way more than me. I'm not sure how much more than me, but like it's probably not way more than me. It's not six figures. I hope it's not six figures, but it's like more than me, and I'm just like I'm telling you how this works, and you are the person that's supposed to like set up these tickets. Anyway, continuing on. This will be bottom-up federations with elected, mandated, and recallable delegates. This is a key part that I advocate for. Recallable. Oh, imagine all those politicians, many of them who would break their campaign promises once they get into office. How many of them would we love to recall if we are able to? Recall this president, recall this person, recall this person, recall this person. And people are against that because that would mean then people would they be recalled all the time, and you're just like, well, yes. And then the people that actually get those position powers have to actually do what they promised that they were going to do. No more of these broken campaign promises. Stop doing that. We continue on. As applied in Paris, in the Paris Commune in 1871, and praised by Marx. In short, he was the first modern socialist. The next anarchist to discuss is Mikhail Bakunin, and again, there are many myths about him, perhaps due to him being right on Marx. After all, social democracies became as reformists as he feared, while the dictatorships of the proletariat indeed became the dictatorship over the proletariat as he predicted. I can see Mikhail Bakunin predicting that, which is why, nope, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm not a fan of like a Leninist style governance, as it were. Rudolf Rocker pointed that out, that Marx and Anarchism, that Lenin and the Vanguard and the Bolsheviks tried to do the correct democratic way of things. But when they realized that the results go against what they wanted, then like Lenin just like dissolved the entire constitution and like set the Vanguard Party, and the Vanguard's to be in control of everything, and then wrote State of Revolution to basically retcon the whole idea of like his political philosophy to justify all that. I might should read States of Revolution knowing that though. And I know some anarchists or some former anarchists that are currently Marxist-Leninists, like they reject the anarchists and go with Marxist-Leninism after reading State from the Revolution. Fine, go on, whatever. But like when you create the state, then you just create another form of capitalism. It's just bureaucratic capitalism, as Rudolf Rocker calls it. Anyway, continuing on. Needless to say, he was not an advocate for pan-destruction. Indeed, the famous urge to destroy, quote, used rolled out was uttered long before he became an anarchist. During his anarchist phase, he repeatedly stressed that violence should be directed at institutions, not people, but recognized this was was unlikely to happen in practice due to the popular passions produced by years of exploitation and oppression. This is another thing that's just I will have to comment on because Mikhail Bakunin did advocate for the propaganda of the deed, and there's legitimate reasons for people thinking that the propaganda of the deed would work, as it were. In practice, it just didn't. Even if a famous politician or a big time and leader of government party gets executed or gets assassinated, as it were. It didn't spark the fervor of revolution like everyone, the proletariat and the workers and stuff like that. Right now, my stance of how to bring about the revolution as it were, or to fundamentally change the society for the better from the bottom up, is to mutual aid societies, food not bombs, and that sort of thing. Because if the general strike is going to happen, there's one plan in August 15th, so it's just not going to do well. You gotta have there has to be supported unions. There's got to be a massive unionization of the workplaces, and then there's got to be like mutual aid societies and mutual aid programs to help fund those people. Because like if people go on join in the general strike and lose their job, they lose their ability to be able to feed their children and pay rent. And so we gotta have like things set up so that like they can be able to like still feed their children and still be like housed during the general strike as we are striking as we were. That's why it's like there's lots of organizations that has to be done, lots of things to like get people on board with the general strike before we actually call a general strike. So continuing on, as an anarchist, he advocated for what he later called a syndicalist strategy, working class self-organization and struggle by means of like unions, strikes, general strikes, insurrections, and workers' councils. This would build the new world while fighting the current one, but while recognizing that needs to win reforms by direct action. Bakunin was not a reformist like Proudhon, but built on his ideas to advocate a revolution in the popular sense of the word. And regardless of what Marxists may say, he also recognizes need for defense of a revolution by means of like federation of workers' councils and workers' militias. In short, he was the first modern revolutionary anarchist. I agree with all that. And finally, I must mention Peter Kropotkin, who was not a gentle prince of cooperation or nonviolence as some asserted, pacifist according to one Marxist, but rather a revolutionary anarchist like Bakunin. He also, like Bakunin, advocated for what he termed a excuse me. He also like Bakunin, advocated for like a term as syndicalist strategies, unions, strikes, general strikes, worker councils, and so on. Kropotkin did not think revolution would be easy. Quite the reverse. He argued anarchism was needed because the state could not handle the inevitable problems a social revolution would throw up. Nor did he deny the role of individuals or class struggles as many claim. He was very clear that mutual aid was just one factor of evolution. Hence the title of his book, A Factor of Evolution. A factor. Not the main factor, a factor. Continue on. And finally, he did not think anarchy would just appear like mother from heaven and so on. Again, and like Bakunin, saw the need for anarchists to organize as anarchists and work within the masses to spread anarchist ideas. Yeah, I do agree with that, actually. And that's kind of like why I do is the sort of thing like Twitch as a word, just like which is why many of my many of my gaming streams are AMAs. Ask me anything. I just hope that like people, because when I do the politics category, I so often just like get people just like randomly come in and ask a question. Sometimes they're just trolls. They just want to ask a question and just like start an argument or debate like about whatever. They don't want to learn anything. But some of them will just like come in and ask a random question, and it's just like, hey, how do you feel the decentralized? What's your opinion on like a decentralized economy as opposed to like a centralized planning economy, like more the Marxists advocate for it? Or actually, no, he didn't say the part of like one that Marx advocates for, but later on he turns out to be like a orthodox Marxist as well, and well, like to like find some place to like have a discussion about those ideas, but like what I was reading at the time was not related to that. So I just kind of like, can we keep the questions and discussion? Can we keep discussion on topic and don't ask me questions in these political streams unless they're related to the topic? But for my gaming streams, most of all my gaming streams are AMAs. Ask me anything. I'm kind of hoping that like those people will just randomly ask a question like that in my gaming streams, because then I'll sit there and actually like have those discussions and like talk about those sort of things. But that doesn't happen in my gaming streams, because I do correctly categorize my streams that, like, I'm playing Dead Cells, I'm playing Phasmophobia, I'm playing the Stardew Valley. I try to encourage that by saying, like, a communist is a narco-syndicalist playing Dead Cells or Stardew Valley or something like that. But sometimes I'll get questions, sometimes I won't. But anyway. So finally, a short section of the essay, conclusions. I was going to discuss the Great Revolutions, the Paris Communes, Russia in 1905 and 1917, Spain 1936. That one is Spain 1936 revolution is one I'm really fascinated to read up about. I have read Rudolf Rocker's Anarcho-Syndicalism Theory and Practice, though. I've read some other things about it, but I'm going to read more about it. But continue on. But there's no time, and I'm not a big fan of being like lectured to. Sufficient to say, each one confirmed anarchist theory in one way or another. This includes the Spanish Revolution, which has shown that anarchism makes mistakes rather than pointing to some fundamental flaws in anarchist theories, as Marx complains. In short, the Russia Revolution failed because Marxists applied their ideas, while the Spanish one failed because anarchists did not apply their ideas. A very big difference. I will end with the final myth, nailing that anarchists cannot appeal to working class people. This is obviously wrong, as most anarchists now and then are working class. I'm working class, a trade unionist, and sees its benefits. And the real question is, how do we apply ourselves in making anarchism a social movement again? If we bust these myths, we will bust all the other myths about anarchism as consequences. And that is the end of Myths About Anarchism by Iain McKay. Now, I fortunately didn't... so basically the conclusion is that they're leaving out evidence that they're going against their own perceived opinions here. I guess. Maybe. Huh. Let's think about that. No, maybe you're right. That's a word. I probably should read the other stuff by Iain McKay. But that's the thing about the Anarchist Library and this anarchism. When I finally kind of wanted to read more about it. My God, it's a lot to read. So that's why there will be always something for me to read on these streams. Now I'm going to switch over to some gaming, and I think, what do I want? And as